My name is Emily Cullen, and I'm the Mescal UL50 Poet in Residence at the University of Limerick's Creative Writing programme. Together with students from the MA in Creative Writing, we're delighted to bring you a series of Espresso Shots of Thought, a project we began last year to explore poetry and poetic process. What inspired me to devise these short segments was a quote by British Indian poet Daljit Nagra, who said that poetry is an espresso shot of thought. So we invite you to relax and enjoy an insightful jolt of poetry from the University of Limerick.
In the month we celebrated International Women's Day, it is fitting to talk a little about the reclamation and redefinition of the meaning of woman and what it means to be a female artist by Irish women poets from their male predecessors and contemporaries, with particular focus on one such poet, the brilliant Evan Boland. I'm Elaine Kiely, student on the MA in Creative Writing at the University of Limerick, and this is my Espresso Shot of Thought. When we look at the tradition of Irish poetry which existed in the early part of the 20th century, we see images, ideas, and invocations of womanhood appear throughout. The female figure is frequently explored as something non-corporeal. It is not real woman, flesh and bone, but rather country as female, and woman as muse. Woman is the subject or, quite often, the object of the art, not the creator. This appearance of Ireland as woman is seen across a vast ambit of Irish writing, and harks back to the ashling tradition of the 18th century, where Ireland appears to the poet in a vision poem, personified as a beautiful female. Edna O'Brien, in her book Mother Ireland, reflects on the country being represented as a woman, a womb, a cave, a cow, a Rosaline, a sow, a bride, a harlot, and of course, the gaunt hag of Bear. Today, the view is vastly different, and few would reject the assertion that Evan Boland was at the forefront of and a force behind this positive change. She redefined the meaning of poet in Ireland, redefined the space occupied by poets to accommodate more than male voices. She did not place herself outside of Ireland's poetic tradition, but instead made space within the tradition for women's voices. In her essay, Poetic Form, A Personal Encounter, Boland says, "I was Irish, I was a woman. Out there somewhere was the orchestra of excitement and exchange about the nature of poetry in our century. We were part of the change. We needed, as poets, to define it for ourselves in order to avail of it." In Object Lessons, The Life of the Woman and the Poet in Our Time, she states, "I could not, as a woman, accept the nation formulated for me by Irish poetry and its traditions." On finding her voice, she notes, "It was the voice of someone living in the middle of their life, from task to task, full of love and intense perceptions." She says, "It began to invade my lyric sense of the poem. I am determined that this voice will be integral to it. It is her voice, that of a woman, an Irish woman, a poet, a creator. Voice is not distinct from, but wholly essential to each other. It is not woman as subject, not object, not country, nor muse." Boland not only embraced the position of Irish woman poet, she actively mentored and supported others in their poetic craft. She was an editor at Ireland House, Ireland's first feminist press during the 1970s and 80s. At Stanford University, as Professor of English and Director of the Creative Writing Programme, she taught and mentored a generation of writers who laud her influence and generosity. She co-founded the Women's Education Bureau in 1984, launched women's poetry competitions, and republished works of Irish women writers that were no longer in print. Her legacy endures in the Evan Boland Emerging Poet Award, first conferred in 2022. It would be remiss of me to allow you to think that Boland was the only woman poet behind the changes that have occurred. While she was a forceful and resolute voice, she was far from alone. Her contemporaries include, but are not limited to, Elaine Kiely, Paula Meehan, Maeve and Nuala Ní Dhomhnaill. Irish women poets have taken back what it means to be a woman and poet in Ireland. They present the lived experience of Irish women, real, often raw, unabashed and unapologetic. These powerful poets crafted rivulets in Irish poetry over decades, which have become robust and dynamic bodies of water for today's Irish women to navigate, sail and swim. The geography of Irish poetry is inhabited by many women's voices, proclaiming their space and calling to each other, as Bolan called to them in her poem, The Rooms of Other Women Poets. Somewhere you are writing or have written in, a room you came to as I come to this, room with honeyed corners, the interior sunless, the windows shut but clear so I can see. The bay wind break, the laburnum hang fire, feel the ache of things ending in the jasmine darkening early.